The master of House Valen had no idea that the shadow stealing bread from his pantry, sleeping between the rafters of his attic, and breathing the same dust-thick air 3 feet above his bed was the same girl the city had mourned as dead 3 years ago, and Lyra Arden intended to keep it that way. She pressed her palm against the rough wood of a support beam, feeling the vibration of footsteps 2 floors below. She'd learned this house's heartbeat better than her own. Every groan of settling timber, every creak of boards that sang when weight shifted west to east, every pocket of air that whistled through gaps only she knew existed. 3 years of living inside the skeleton of the Valen estate had turned her into something more than a trespasser and less than a ghost. She was the thing that breathed in negative space. The silence that observed when no one remembered to look up. Tonight, though, something was wrong. The footsteps weren't following their usual pattern. The servants retired at the same hour every evening, walked the same paths through corridors, paused at the same doorways to extinguish lamps before heading to the quarters. She'd memorized their rhythms the way other girls memorized dance steps. But these footsteps were different, too measured, too deliberate, and they were climbing the narrow staircase that led to the western attic, the one she used to access her nests of stolen blankets and hoarded supplies. She held her breath. The crawl space she occupied was barely wide enough for her shoulders. It had been a servant's passage once, back when the original estate was built during Blackmere's founding. Before renovations buried the old bones beneath newer wings, and everyone forgot the veins that ran between walls. Lyra had found the entrance by accident during her first desperate night, half frozen, bleeding from a gash where she'd torn herself climbing the estate's outer wall, with nowhere left in the world that wouldn't kill her on sight. The house had opened for her like a secret kept too long. It had swallowed her whole. She pressed her eye to a knothole in the wood and watched. A man stood at the base of the attic ladder. Not a servant, not a guard. Cassian Valen himself, dark hair falling across his forehead, still wearing his day clothes but with his collar loosened, holding a single candle that cast long shadows up the walls. He wasn't looking around with confusion or suspicion. He was looking up, directly at the ceiling hatch, with an expression of absolute, infuriating patience, as though he were waiting, as though he knew. Lyra's pulse hammered against her ribs. She didn't move, didn't let herself even shift weight. She'd seen him before, of course, hundreds of times over 3 years, through cracks and gaps and the spaces between floorboards. She'd watched Cassian Valen move through his own house like a man carrying ghosts he couldn't name. She'd watched him sit alone in his study past midnight, staring at ledgers he never seemed to finish reading. She'd watched him speak to servants with unexpected gentleness, watched him dismiss advisors who suggested cruelty, watched him murmur to himself in that quiet, deliberate way when he thought no one could hear. She'd watched him grieve his father without tears, and now he was climbing the ladder, 1 rung, 2, 3. His movements were unhurried, almost careful, as though he didn't want to startle something fragile. The hatch creaked open, and cold autumn air rushed down from above. Lyra pressed herself flatter against the beam, dust catching in her throat, every muscle locked. Candlelight spilled across the attic floor. He didn't shout for guards, didn't draw a weapon, didn't even look surprised when his eyes found her, crouched in the shadows like something feral and cornered. 3 years of survival written in the sharp angles of her face and the defiance burning in her eyes. Cassian Valen simply leaned his shoulder against a support beam, held the candle steady, and looked up at her with that same unreadable calm. Then he asked, voice quiet as falling snow, "Comfortable up there?" For 3 heartbeats, Lyra didn't breathe. For 3 years, she had lived above his head, above his bed, above the life he thought was entirely his own, gathering proof against the house that had destroyed hers. And now, with nowhere left to run and nothing left to lose, she stepped into the light. He didn't order her down. He climbed up. Lyra watched, muscles coiled tight, as Cassian Valen set the candle on a wooden trunk and pulled himself fully into the attic. He moved with the careful economy of someone who'd learned not to waste energy on displays of power. When he straightened, dust motes swirled in the candlelight between them, like a curtain neither could quite see through. "You've been here a while," he observed, not a question. She said nothing. Speech felt like surrender. His gaze swept the space, not cataloging evidence for an accusation, but reading the story she'd written in blankets folded precisely, in food stored away from moisture, in the careful system she'd built to survive. He looked at her hidden life the way someone might look at a text in a language they were only beginning to understand. "I've suspected for months," he added quietly. The pantry inventories never quite aligned. Bread disappeared in predictable patterns, and there were sounds, footsteps where there shouldn't be footsteps. Lyra's throat tightened. He'd known. Not the whole truth, perhaps, but enough. "I thought it was mice at first," he continued, a ghost of something that might have been humor touching his voice. "But mice don't fold blankets. Why didn't you—" The words escaped before she could stop them. "Call the guards?" He tilted his head slightly, studying her in that unnerving way of his. "I wanted to understand first why someone would choose to live in walls rather than ask for shelter. Because asking gets you killed," she thought. "Because mercy is a luxury. Houses like yours don't extend to girls like me." But she kept her mouth shut. Cassian didn't press. He simply stood there, seemingly content with silence, until finally he said, "I'll bring food tomorrow evening. You don't need to steal it." "I don't need your—" "I know." His voice remained level, unthreatening. "But I'm offering it anyway." He left the candle and climbed back down. Lyra stood in the dark long after his footsteps faded, trying to understand what game he was playing. He kept his word. The next evening, just after sunset, she heard his footsteps on the ladder. This time he didn't climb all the way up, just left a cloth-wrapped bundle at the top of the hatch and retreated. Inside, bread, cheese, apples, a small jar of honey, a water skin, no note, no demands, no price named. Lyra ate slowly, waiting for the trap to spring. It didn't. The wound came 3 days later. She was reinforcing a loose beam, her own maintenance, keeping the house from betraying her presence, when old wood splintered under her palm. Pain lanced sharp and immediate across her hand, blood welled dark in the candlelight. She was wrapping it clumsily with a strip of torn cloth when she heard him climbing. "Don't," she started, but Cassian was already pulling himself into the attic, concern creasing his features. His eyes went to her hand immediately. Let me see. I'm fine." "You're bleeding through the bandage." He moved closer, not forceful, but inexorable as tide. "Please." Something in that single word made her hesitate. Not command, request. She extended her hand. He knelt in front of her, the Lord of House Valen, kneeling on attic floor planks, and unwrapped her makeshift bandage with careful fingers. His touch was surprisingly gentle, clinical but not cold. "You'll scar," he murmured, examining the cut. "I already have," Lyra said before thinking. His hands stilled for just a moment. He didn't ask from where, didn't pry into wounds he couldn't see. He simply cleaned the cut with water from a flask he'd brought, applied a proper salve that smelled of honey and herbs, and wrapped her hand in clean linen. "You're good at this," she observed despite herself. My father believed every lord should know basic field medicine." His voice carried something sharp beneath the surface. "He said it made men more valuable in war." Everything came back to value with the old lord. Resources, strategy, use. Lyra had heard the stories. Alaric Valen had ruled House Valen like a fortress under siege, ruthless, calculating, always 3 moves ahead. When he died suddenly 2 years ago, some whispered poison. Others said his own cruelty had stopped his heart. The city had exhaled in relief, but they still feared his son. "You're not like him," Lyra said quietly. It wasn't a question. Cassian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "No." He tied off the bandage with precise movements. "I'm not." He stood, started to descend, then paused. "You never relax," he observed. "Even now." Lyra met his gaze. You never raise your voice, even when you should." Something passed between them, recognition perhaps, an understanding that they were both performing versions of themselves, wearing control like armor. "Tomorrow evening," Cassian said. "Same time." It wasn't a command. It was an offer to continue. And despite every instinct screaming danger, Lyra found herself nodding. After he left, she stared at her bandaged hand, at the careful work of a man who'd knelt in dust to tend a trespasser's wounds, and wondered which of them was truly trapped. In Blackmere, power belonged to houses, ancient families who controlled trade, land, politics, not through kings or councils, but through legacy and ruthlessness. House Valen sat at the top of that hierarchy. And Lyra Arden was learning that the man who now ruled it might be the most dangerous kind of enemy, the kind who chose kindness when cruelty would be simpler. The dreams came every night, but tonight they arrived with the smell of smoke. 3 years ago, the Arden estate ablaze. Lyra remembered her mother's hand gripping hers in the dark, her father's voice hoarse with smoke and panic. "The doors, they won't open. Someone sealed them from outside." Fire climbed the walls like something alive and hungry. The windows had been barred, every exit blocked. Not an accident, a massacre dressed as misfortune. Her father had found the servants' passage, the one the family used during the old wars, before Blackmere's houses made peace. He'd shoved Lyra inside, pressed a kiss to her forehead that tasted like ash and goodbye. "Run," he'd whispered. "Oh, don't stop. Don't look back." She'd crawled through those tunnels while her home became a funeral pyre, emerged in the lower city covered in soot and blood, half mad with grief, while the official reports already called it tragic and unavoidable. While guards counted foreign coin in dark alleys, while House Valen quietly absorbed Arden holdings, Lyra woke gasping, the attic pressing close around her like a coffin. Cassian came that evening as rain hammered the roof in sheets, turning the attic into a drum. He had to shout to be heard. "I brought soup. Thought you might." He paused, seeing her face. "Bad night?" She turned away. "They're all bad nights." He set down the covered bowl, didn't leave. Instead, he settled onto the trunk that had become his usual spot, seemingly content to sit in the storm's fury. Minutes passed. Oh, then, why this house? The question hung between thunderclaps. Lyra could have lied, should have lied, but 3 years of hiding had worn her edges sharp and thin. Because monsters don't check their own shadows. Cassian went very still. "What does that mean?" "It means," she said carefully, "that the safest place to hide from a predator is in its den, where it feels most secure, most untouchable. You think I'm a predator. I think your house is." She met his gaze. "I think it swallows smaller houses whole and calls it politics." Something dangerous flickered across his face. Not anger, but recognition. The look of a man who'd suspected the rot in his own foundation, and just had it confirmed. Before he could respond, another thunderclap shook the rafters. Cassian shifted his weight, and the plank beneath him groaned ominously. Don't, Lyra started. Too late. The wood gave way with a sharp crack. Cassian dropped, caught himself on the beam's edge, legs dangling through the new hole into the room below. For a frozen second he hung there, shock written across his features. Lyra moved on instinct. She grabbed his wrist, then his sleeve, hauling backward with strength, born of 3 years surviving in tight spaces. They tumbled onto solid planking in a tangle of limbs, breathing hard. "You're terrible at this," she said. "At attic living? At survival." The absurdity hit her suddenly. The lord of House Valen nearly falling through his own ceiling, saved by the girl hiding in his walls. A laugh escaped her, sharp and unexpected. His eyes widened. "Was that? Did you just—" "Don't," she warned. But another laugh broke free, this one fuller. The sound felt foreign in her throat, like a language she'd forgotten how to speak. Cassian stared at her as though seeing something rare and startling. Then, impossibly, he smiled. Not the careful, controlled expression he wore in public, but something genuine and crooked and entirely human. "I think," he said slowly, still catching his breath, "that was the first time I've heard you laugh. Don't get used to it. Too late." The rain pounded overhead, sealing them in their small pocket of lamplight. Lyra became acutely aware of how close they were sitting, how his sleeve was still bunched in her fist. She released him like he'd burned her. Cassian didn't move away. "My father kept records," he said quietly. "Meticulous ones. Financial transactions, land acquisitions, political maneuvers. I've been reviewing them since he died." He paused. "There are things that don't align. Payments to people who shouldn't have needed paying. Acquisitions that happened too conveniently." Lyra's heart thundered louder than the storm. "The Arden fire," Cassian continued, each word careful. "It happened 3 years ago. Within a month, Valen absorbed their holdings. The official report said accidental." His eyes found hers. "But you don't believe that." "I know that." Her voice came out raw. "I was there when they sealed the doors." The confession hung between them like a blade. Cassian's expression shifted, horror, understanding, and something that looked dangerously like grief. "You were—" He stopped, started again. "How did you—" "Servants' tunnels. My father found them." She swallowed hard. "He didn't make it out." Silence stretched, unbroken only by rain. "I didn't know," Cassian said finally. "I swear to you I didn't know. But you benefited." "Yes." He didn't flinch from it. "And if my house did this, if my father," his jaw clenched, "I will find proof, and I will make it right." Lyra wanted to believe him. That was the terrifying part. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you risk your own house?" "Because," Cassian said simply, "I am not my father." Thunder cracked overhead, and for the first time since the night fire consumed her world, Lyra Arden felt something besides survival take root in her chest. Cassian brought the ledgers 3 nights later, not to the attic. He'd learned she wouldn't come down to his study, but carried them up himself. Heavy, leather-bound volumes that thudded onto the trunk with finality. Rain had given way to cold autumn wind that whistled through gaps in the roof. "I need you to look at something," he said without preamble. Lyra eyed the books warily. "Why?" "Because you know things you shouldn't. About Arden holdings, about land boundaries." He opened the first ledger, pages crackling. "And I think you can tell me what I'm missing." She shouldn't engage. Every instinct screamed to stay silent, stay safe. But curiosity, and something darker, something that tasted like vindication, pulled her closer. The entries were meticulous. Her father had taught her to read financial records when she was 12, said every noble should understand the language of power. She scanned the columns. and her blood went cold. "This is wrong," she said, finger tracing a line. "The Eastern Arden Tract." It didn't border Valen lands. There was a commons between them, 3 acres of shared grazing ground maintained by both houses for 2 generations. Cassian leaned in. "The acquisition documents say direct border." "Then the documents are lying." She flipped pages, found another entry. "And this, the dockside warehouse. Arden sold it to the Merchants Guild in spring, not to Valen. I remember the contracts being signed. I was there." She caught herself too late. Cassian had gone very still beside her. "You were there," he repeated slowly, "at an Arden estate negotiation 3 years ago." Lyra's throat closed. "You know the exact acreage of their commons land. You remember specific contract signings." His voice remained carefully neutral, but his eyes were sharp, piecing together a puzzle she'd kept hidden for so long. "You don't just know about House Arden. You know it the way someone knows their own home." She pulled back, but there was nowhere to go in the small space. Cassian turned more pages, and she saw what he was searching for: the signature lines on the land transfer documents. Documents that supposedly transferred Arden holdings to Valen custody after the fire claimed the last of the family line. He pointed to one signature: Aldrich Arden, estate executor. He looked up. "Did your father have an executor?" "He didn't need one. He had—" She stopped. "An heir," Cassian finished. "A daughter, who was reported dead in the fire." The candle flame wavered between them. "The inventory records mention her twice," he continued, voice soft now, almost gentle. "Lyra Arden, 14 years old, survived by none." He paused. She'd be 17 now." Silence stretched like a breaking thread. "You're Arden." Not a question. A realization settling into certainty. Lyra waited for accusation, for anger, for the moment he'd call guards and end this. Instead, Cassian simply looked at her, really looked, the way he had that first night. And something like sorrow crossed his face. "You've been living in the house that destroyed yours," he said quietly. "For 3 years, watching, waiting, surviving," she corrected, voice rough. "No." He shook his head. "Hunting." She didn't deny it. Cassian sat back, ran a hand through his hair. "These signatures are forged. The land boundaries falsified. If Arden's heir was alive, none of these transfers would be legal." He looked at her. "You could reclaim everything." "With what proof?" "I'm legally dead." And even if I wasn't," she gestured at the ledgers, "your house has had 3 years to bury the truth. Who would believe a girl who crawled out of a fire with nothing but accusations?" "I would." 2 words. They hung in the air like an offering. Lyra laughed, sharp and bitter. "You benefit from my ruin. This estate's wealth, your position, half of it came from absorbing Arden holdings. Why would you give that up?" "Because it was stolen," Cassian's jaw set. "And I am not my father." Pretty words from the man sleeping in a house built on my family's bones. "Then let me prove they're more than words." He leaned forward, intensity burning in his eyes. "Let me find evidence, real evidence, documents, witnesses, payment records, something the council can't ignore." "Why?" The question tore out of her. "Why risk everything?" "Because keeping what my father stole makes me complicit." His voice dropped. "And because you deserve justice." "I deserve revenge." "Maybe." He didn't look away. "But I'm offering you truth first. Publicly documented, legally binding truth. It's slower than a knife in the dark, but it lasts." Lyra studied his face, searching for deception, for the crack where his true intentions would show. But Cassian Valen met her gaze steadily. This man who'd fed her, tended her wounds, sat with her in silence and storm. This man who stood to lose everything if he kept his word. "If your house did this," Cassian said carefully, "I will undo it, all of it, even if it costs me Valen's seat on the council, even if it leaves me with nothing." He paused. "But I need your help." An uneasy alliance. A gamble that could destroy them both. Lyra looked at the ledgers, at 3 years of false records, at the paper trail of her family's murder dressed as misfortune. Then she looked at Cassian and made a choice that terrified her. Where do we start? The investigation consumed them both. Cassian worked in careful secrecy, requesting old records under the pretense of estate management, interviewing servants about his father's final years, tracing financial threads that led to dark places. Lyra provided what she remembered, names her father had mentioned, families her mother had distrusted, the subtle political tensions that preceded the fire. Together, they built a case from shadows. 2 weeks in, Cassian climbed to the attic with a leather folder, his face grave. "I found the bribery trail," he said without preamble. "Payments to 3 city guards, foreign coin, Calvary silver, untraceable through normal channels, but my father kept obsessive records." He spread documents across the floor. "Here, 3 deposits, each the day after the Arden fire, marked as security consultation fees." Lyra's hands trembled as she studied the pages. "These guards, I remember them. They were at our estate that night, supposedly conducting a routine inspection." Her voice hardened. "They're the ones who sealed the doors. 2 are dead now, hunting accidents officially." Cassian's jaw tightened. "But the 3rd transferred to the eastern border garrison. I've sent word requesting his testimony." "He'll never talk." "He will if he thinks refusing means hanging for murder." Cassian met her eyes. "The council won't ignore 3 coordinated deaths. If they bring charges," Lyra thought, "if they don't protect their own." "There's more," Cassian continued. "The land seizure documents. They were filed 3 days before the fire. Someone knew Arden would be vulnerable before it happened. The air left Lyra's lungs, premeditated, not opportunistic, but planned. "Who filed them?" she whispered. "Initially, your father's supposed executor, Aldrich Arden, except..." He pulled another document. "Aldrich Arden died 6 months earlier. Heart failure. I found the death record. A ghost signature, written in my father's hand." Cassian's voice carried equal parts anger and shame. "I compared it to his personal correspondence. The slant, the pressure. It's identical." Lyra closed her eyes. "Proof. Finally, concrete proof." "The council started asking questions," Cassian said quietly. "Rumors of an audit on old land acquisitions. Someone's pushing for review of all transfers from the past 5 years. Who? I don't know yet, but it means we're running out of time." He gathered the documents carefully. "If they discover Valen's corruption before we present evidence properly, they'll bury it to avoid scandal. But if we come forward first, we control the narrative." "Exactly." Their eyes met in the candlelight, and Lyra felt the weight of what they were building. Not just a case, a revolution against the very system that had protected men like Alaric Valen. "I'll keep searching," Cassian said. "There has to be more. Physical evidence, witnesses we can protect." He didn't climb down until well past midnight. Lyra found him 3 nights later, slumped over his desk in the study. She'd descended from the attic, a risk she rarely took, following the strip of light beneath his door. The house slept around them, silent and vast. Cassian sat with his head pillowed on crossed arms, surrounded by scattered papers and guttering candles. His breathing was deep and even, exhausted sleep claiming him where he'd fallen. Lyra approached slowly, studying him in unguarded rest. The tension he carried like armor had smoothed from his features, making him look younger, vulnerable. A half-written letter lay beneath his hand. To the High Council, regarding irregularities in... She shouldn't be here, shouldn't risk exposure. But her feet carried her forward anyway. There was a blanket folded on the reading chair. She lifted it carefully, moved to drape it over his shoulders. "Mother, I'm sorry," Cassian murmured, still deep in sleep. I didn't know. I should have stopped him." Lyra froze, blanket suspended in air, his face creased with distress. "Please, I would have, if I'd known what he was." The words cracked something in her chest. She'd spent 3 years hating House Valen as a monolith, never considering that its heir might carry wounds of his own, that he might have been trapped too in different ways. Gently, she settled the blanket across his shoulders. Cassian's breathing evened out. The nightmare, or memory, passed. Lyra should have left then, should have retreated to safety. Instead, she sank into the chair across from him, watching candlelight paint shadows across his sleeping face. She was still sitting there when his eyes opened an hour later. They stared at each other across the desk, caught, both of them, in something neither had planned. Cassian's gaze dropped to the blanket, then back to her face. "You came down," he said softly. "You fell asleep. And you stayed." Lyra had no answer for that. Or rather, had too many answers, and none she could afford to speak aloud. She stood abruptly. Wait." Cassian rose too, blanket falling away. "Lyra." The sound of her name in his voice stopped her. "Thank you," he said simply. "For this. For trusting me enough to..." He gestured at the papers. "For believing I meant what I said. I don't trust easily. I know." A ghost of a smile. "But you're here. That's enough." The space between them felt charged, dangerous in new ways. Lyra had survived 3 years on vigilance and distance, but distance was eroding. And vigilance couldn't protect her from the way her pulse quickened when Cassian looked at her like she was something precious instead of broken. "Good night, Cassian," she whispered. She fled before he could answer, before the walls she'd built could crumble completely. Behind her, Cassian stood in the candlelight, watching her disappear like smoke, and knew with absolute certainty that he was falling for a ghost who'd chosen to haunt him. And he would burn his own house down before he let anyone harm her again. The evening started like any other. Cassian took his usual dinner in the study, simpler than eating in the formal dining hall he'd told her once, and less performative. Lyra had taken to watching from the servants' passage behind the east wall, a crack in the paneling giving her a sliver of view. She told herself it was strategic, monitoring his investigation, ensuring he kept his word. The truth was harder to admit. Tonight, a servant brought the evening tray. Roasted pheasant, bread, and wine in a crystal decanter that caught lamplight like captured stars. Cassian thanked the man absently, already absorbed in a document detailing grain shipments from 3 years prior. The servant withdrew. Cassian reached for the wine without looking, poured a glass with practiced ease, lifted it toward his lips. The smell hit Lyra like a fist. Bitter almonds, faint but unmistakable beneath the wine's deep notes. She moved before thought, before fear, before anything but instinct. The hidden panel slammed open, and she lunged across the study in 3 strides. "Don't!" Her hand struck the crystal glass, sent it flying from Cassian's grip. It shattered against the wall in an explosion of dark liquid and glass shards. Cassian jerked back, shock written across his face. "What?" The study door burst open. Guards flooded in, drawn by the crash, hands on sword hilts. "My lord." The captain scanned the room, found Lyra standing there, wild-haired, breathing hard, very much not supposed to exist. His eyes widened. "Who?" "She just saved my life," Cassian said quietly, staring at the wine spreading across the floor like blood. Lyra's legs shook. She pressed a hand against the desk for balance. "Smell it," she said hoarsely. "Bitter almonds. It's in the wine." The captain knelt, inhaled carefully, and his face went white. "Poison. Cyanide derivative." He looked up sharply. "Who brought the tray?" "Marcus, the evening steward." "Get him, now. And seal the kitchens. No one leaves." The captain rose, but his gaze kept sliding to Lyra. "My lord, the girl is under my protection," Cassian said, voice hardening to steel. "Anyone who questions that will answer to me personally." The guards withdrew in controlled chaos, leaving them alone. Silence stretched, broken only by Lyra's ragged breathing. "How did you know?" Cassian asked. "My mother taught me. She said noble women should recognize poisons. We're frequent targets." The words came mechanically. "Bitter almonds mean cyanide. In wine, it's nearly impossible to detect unless you're looking for it. You risked yourself." Something raw entered his voice. "You came out of hiding, exposed yourself to my gods, knowing what it could cost. You're an idiot," she snapped, fear transmuting to anger because anger was safer. "You dismiss servants early, eat alone, don't taste your food before drinking. You're practically begging someone to kill you." "Lyra, do you understand what you've done?" Her voice cracked. "Now they've seen me. Now they know someone's here. Even under your protection, I'm—" She couldn't finish. Visible, vulnerable, known. "I'm sorry." Cassian moved closer, not touching, just near. "I'm sorry you had to choose between safety and watching you die?" The admission tore out. "Yes, apparently I'm the idiot." His expression shifted. Surprise, then something deeper. Understanding. "You don't want me dead," he said softly. Not a question. Lyra looked away, but her hands were still shaking. "I've invested 3 years into this investigation. It would be inconvenient to start over." "Lyra, don't." She wrapped her arms around herself. "Oh, don't make this into something it's not. What if it already is?" Before she could answer, the captain returned, face grim. "Marcus is gone. Fled through the kitchen entrance. We found foreign coin in his quarters. Calvary silver. The same currency used to bribe the guards who'd sealed the Arden doors." Cassian's jaw clenched. "They know we're investigating." "There's more, my lord." The captain hesitated. "A messenger arrived while we were searching. From the High Council." He extended a sealed letter. Cassian broke the wax, scanned the contents, and his face went carefully blank. "What?" Lyra demanded. "Official audit. All major houses, but they're starting with Valen." He looked up, and she saw fear beneath his control. "They arrive in 1 week." The words landed like stones. 1 week. Not the months they'd need to build an airtight case, not time to protect witnesses or secure evidence properly. 7 days to expose decades of corruption or watch it be buried forever. "They're moving faster than expected," Cassian said. "Someone's pushing this forward. Or someone wants to ensure we don't have time to prepare." Lyra's mind raced. "If they audit before we present evidence, they'll find discrepancies but attribute them to your father. You might face sanctions, but the full truth, the murders, the conspiracy, it'll be dismissed as old business. And you'll remain legally dead, while whoever ordered the poisoning tonight walks free." Their eyes met across shattered crystal and spilled wine. "We accelerate," Cassian said. Present everything we have directly to the High Council before the audit begins. We don't have enough yet. Then we get it. Determination hardened his features. The surviving guard, the forged documents, the bribery trails. We compile it all and force the council to look. They could reject it, protect Valen's reputation to maintain stability, or they could finally hold my father accountable. He moved closer. Either way, we try, because the alternative is letting him win from beyond the grave. Lyra studied him, this man who'd just survived assassination, whose house faced public ruin, who stood to lose everything. This man willing to burn his own legacy for truth. 1 week, she said. Together. Outside, night deepened over Blackmere. Inside, two people who'd started as hunter and prey prepared to become something far more dangerous. Allies, and perhaps, though neither would say it yet, something more. They worked through the night like soldiers before battle. Documents spread across the study floor in careful categories. Bribery evidence, forged signatures, witness testimonies Cassian had secured through intimidation and coin. The surviving guard had confessed everything in writing, terrified enough of hanging to betray his conspirators. It was damning, comprehensive, irrefutable, and it would destroy them both. Lyra sat back against the desk, exhaustion pulling at her bones. Dawn light crept through the windows, painting everything in shades of ash and gold. When we present this, she said quietly, they'll know I'm alive. Cassian looked up from organizing ledger pages. Yes? Whoever ordered the poisoning will try again, publicly this time. She kept her voice steady. An Arden heir returning from the dead threatens more than just Valen. Other houses profited from our fall, absorbed our trade contracts, our political alliances. I'll assign guards. Guards can be bought. You know that now. Silence settled heavy between them. And you, Lyra continued, meeting his eyes. When you testify against your own father, the council will strip you of influence at minimum, possibly the house seat entirely. You'll have the Valen name, but none of its power. I know. You'll be vulnerable. Any house with old grievances could move against you. I know, he repeated quieter. Then why? The question broke from her. Why sacrifice everything for a girl who hid in your attic? Or for a family you never knew? Cassian set down the papers, rose, crossed to where she sat. He knelt in front of her, again always kneeling, as though making himself smaller might make her feel safer. You don't owe me justice, Lyra whispered. You don't owe me anything. No, he agreed. I don't owe you. He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of dust-streaked hair behind her ear. But I owe myself honesty. And the truth is, I can't be the man I want to be while standing on your family's grave. Cassian, let me finish. His hand lingered near her face, not quite touching. 3 years ago, I inherited a house built on cruelty. I told myself I'd be different, but I didn't question the foundation. I just lived in it, benefited from it. Pain crossed his features. Then you appeared. And suddenly, I couldn't ignore what that foundation was made of. Bones and ash, Lyra said bitterly. Yes. He didn't flinch. And if I do nothing, if I let the audit bury the truth to protect Valen's reputation, then I'm no different than my father. I'm just a gentler version of the same rot. Tears burned behind Lyra's eyes. You could die for this. I could die tomorrow in my sleep from poison I don't smell. A ghost of a smile. At least this way, I die honest. That's not funny. I'm not laughing. They stared at each other in the breaking dawn, and Lyra felt something inside her crack wide open. All the walls she'd built, all the distance she'd maintained, crumbling like ash. "I don't want you to die," she whispered. "I don't want you to hide anymore." His voice dropped. "I want you to stand in sunlight and reclaim your name. I want to watch you rebuild what was stolen. I want—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "I want things I have no right to want." "Like what?" "Like this." He leaned forward slowly, giving her every chance to retreat, to refuse, to push him away. But Lyra didn't move, couldn't move, could only watch as Cassian's hand cupped her jaw with devastating gentleness. "Do you want this?" he asked, lips inches from hers. Not a claim, a question. Permission requested, not assumed. "Yes," Lyra breathed. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, like neither quite believed it was happening. Then Lyra's hands fisted in his shirt, and Cassian's arm wrapped around her waist, and it deepened into something that tasted like grief and hope and 3 years of unspoken longing, not desperate, earned, every moment they'd shared, every wound tended, every document reviewed. Though every risk taken had led to this, to choosing each other when choosing meant losing everything else. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cassian rested his forehead against hers. "Whatever happens tomorrow—" "Don't," Lyra interrupted. "Don't say goodbye yet." "I was going to say—" He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. "Whatever happens, I don't regret this, any of it." "Even if you lose everything?" "I'm not losing everything." His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "I'm choosing what matters." Lyra kissed him again, softer this time, memorizing the feel of it. Because tomorrow they would stand before the High Council and speak truths that could get them both killed. But tonight, this one stolen moment, was theirs. A sharp knock shattered the quiet. They sprang apart as the study door opened. The captain stood there, face grave, arm holding an official seal. "My lord, the High Council has accelerated the proceedings," he extended the letter. "You're summoned to testify. Today, noon." The parchment felt heavy as judgment in Cassian's hands. Not tomorrow, not next week. Today. He looked at Lyra, found her already standing, spine straight, eyes clear. The girl who'd hidden in shadows for 3 years, preparing to step into the light. "Are you ready?" he asked. She took his hand, squeezed once. "No, but we're doing this anyway. Together. Together." Outside, the city bells began to toll the morning hour. Inside, 2 people who'd started as enemies prepared to face the most powerful institution in Blackmere. Not as lord and trespasser, as allies bound by truth, and love forged in the ruins of houses that should have destroyed them both. The council chamber was built to intimidate. High vaulted ceilings carved with the crests of Blackmere's founding families. Walls of dark granite that swallowed sound and light. 7 stone thrones arranged in a semicircle, each occupied by a house lord who'd inherited power the way others inherited eye color, without question, without earning it. Cassian stood in the center of that cold space, alone under their collective gaze. Lyra watched from the gallery above, hidden among the handful of observers permitted to witness proceedings. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Lord Valen. The High Counselor, Lord Brennan of House Merrick, leaned forward. "You requested this emergency session. Speak." Cassian's voice carried clear and steady. "I come before this council to present evidence of corruption within House Valen, specifically our crimes committed by my late father, Alaric Valen, in the acquisition of Arden Holdings 3 years ago." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. "Serious accusations," Brennan said, "against your own house. Against the truth." Cassian gestured, and his steward came forward with the evidence boxes. I present signed land seizure orders, filed 3 days before the Arden fire, orders signed by a man who'd been dead 6 months, forged in my father's hand. He laid the documents on the presentation table. Council members leaned in, skeptical interest sharpening to focus. Financial records showing payments of Calvary silver to 3 city guards, the same guards who were present at the Arden estate the night of the fire. Payments marked as consultation fees, but deposited the day after the family burned. More papers. The council's expressions darkened. And a signed confession from the surviving guard, detailing how he and his companions were paid to seal the Arden estate doors from the outside, paid to ensure no one escaped. The chamber erupted. Preposterous. An obvious forgery. Lord Valen, do you understand what you're claiming? Murder, Cassian said flatly. Conspiracy. Theft of lands through orchestrated massacre. I understand perfectly. Lord Thane of House Corvus rose, face flushed with anger. You would disgrace your own house with these wild allegations. Besmirch your father's legacy based on documents that could easily be fabricated. These documents are verified, Cassian replied. Compare the handwriting. Cross-reference the financial records with the city guard's payment logs. Everything is traceable. Even if true, Lady Morwen interjected, why bring this forward? You inherited your father's sins, but you didn't commit them. The council would have quietly resolved any irregularities. By burying them, Cassian said. By protecting house reputation over justice. That is how houses survive, Thane snapped. That is how houses rot from within. Cassian's voice hardened. I will not build my legacy on stolen land and murdered innocents. Then you're a fool, Thane spat. You disgrace your house. Cassian met his eyes. No, I cleanse it. Silence fell like a blade. Then Lyra stood. Every eye in the gallery turned to her. She descended the stairs slowly, each step feeling like walking into fire. Whispers chased her movement. Who is she? Oh, why does she dare? She reached the chamber floor and walked to Cassian's side. My name, she said, voice shaking but clear, is Lyra Arden, daughter of Marcus and Elena Arden, heir to House Arden. She turned to face the council. And I did not die 3 years ago. The chamber exploded into chaos. Impossible. The girl died in the fire. Guards, remove this impostor. Let her speak. Cassian's voice cut through the noise. Not loud, but absolute. Let her speak, or I walk from this chamber and take this evidence to every broadsheet in the city. Brennan raised a hand. Silence grudgingly returned. Lyra's hands clenched at her sides. The night of the fire, I was 14. My parents were hosting a small gathering. Our city guards arrived for what they called a routine inspection. Her voice steadied as she spoke truth she'd carried alone for 3 years. But they didn't inspect. They sealed every door from the outside, barred every window. She could feel the council's attention sharpening. My father found the old servant tunnels. He pushed me inside and told me to run. Her throat tightened. I crawled through those passages while my home became a pyre. While my parents... She stopped, breathed, while they burned alive behind locked doors. Why come forward now? Brennan asked quietly. Because I found proof. Because Lord Valen chose integrity over inheritance. She looked at Cassian. Because someone finally believed me. Cassian didn't step in front of her, didn't shield or speak for her. He simply stood beside her, presence steady, letting her claim her own voice. These are serious allegations, Brennan said. If true, they are true. Lyra's voice rang clear. And I have lived 3 years in the shadows of the house that destroyed mine, gathering proof, waiting for the moment I could speak without being silenced. The council members exchanged weighted glances, political calculations happening in real time. Finally, Brennan spoke. "This council will review all evidence presented. If Lord Valen's claims are substantiated," he paused, "House Arden's lands and titles will be restored to its rightful heir. House Valen will be stripped of all holdings acquired through fraudulent means." "And Lord Valen?" Thane demanded. "What of his complicity?" "He had no knowledge," Lyra said firmly. "He was barely older than I when it happened." "Nevertheless," Brennan continued, "House Valen's seat on this council will be retained, but with reduced holdings and voting influence, a consequence of inheriting corruption, even unknowingly." Cassian inclined his head. "I accept the council's judgment." "So ruled," Brennan declared. "Lady Arden, you will be assigned protection until threats against you are neutralized. Lord Valen, you will provide full cooperation in identifying your father's remaining conspirators." "Gladly," Cassian said. The session dissolved. Lords and ladies filed out, already calculating how this shift in power affected their own interests. Lyra stood in the emptying chamber, legs shaking now that adrenaline was fading. Cassian's hand found hers, squeezed gently. "You did it," he murmured. "We did it." They'd won, lost everything, and won everything simultaneously. Justice, truth, each other. And a future neither had dared imagine until now. Spring came to Blackmere like a promise kept. 6 months had passed since the council's verdict, and the city had transformed in small, significant ways. The Arden estate, what remained of it after the fire, was being rebuilt stone by stone. Lyra oversaw the construction herself, walking through scaffolding and sawdust, reclaiming her family's legacy one careful decision at a time. The dock workers who'd been displaced when Valen absorbed Arden trade contracts returned to their posts. Fair wages, her father's old foreman said with tears in his eyes. Just like the old days. House Valen's estate stood quieter now. Smaller staff, fewer political visitors, reduced holdings that left the treasury leaner but cleaner. Some of the old guard had resigned rather than serve under a lord who'd chosen truth over power. Cassian didn't mourn their loss. "The house feels lighter," he told Lyra one evening as they walked the grounds together. A routine they'd fallen into. Her visits no longer covert, no longer survival, but choice. "Smaller," she corrected with a slight smile. "Better." He caught her hand, laced their fingers together. "Honest." The council had been true to their word. Protection for Lyra until the remaining conspirators were found and dealt with. 2 more arrests in the months since, a minor lord who'd profited from Arden land sales, and a council clerk who'd falsified records. The rot was being cut out piece by piece. Blackmere was healing. So were they. "Come with me," Cassian said suddenly. "There's something I want to show you." He led her inside, up the familiar stairs, past the study where they'd first worked side by side, higher still until they reached the narrow attic staircase. Lyra paused. "Cassian, trust me." The attic had changed. Where dust and cobwebs had once claimed every surface, now clean floors gleamed in lamplight. The broken plank was repaired. New support beams reinforced the structure, and in the corner where Lyra had made her nest of stolen blankets, someone had built a small reading nook, cushions, a low table, shelves waiting to be filled with books. "You renovated it," Lyra whispered. "I couldn't leave it as it was, but I couldn't erase it either." Cassian crossed to the reading nook, sat on the cushions. "So, I transformed it. Made it somewhere you'd want to be. Not somewhere you had to be." Lyra moved slowly into the space, seeing it with new eyes. Not a prison or hiding place, but a sanctuary. a memorial to survival that honored the past without being trapped in it. "You could have exposed me that first night," she said softly, settling beside him. "Called guards. Ended it before it began. You could have killed me in my sleep." Cassian's lips quirked. "I was rather vulnerable, sleeping directly beneath an angry air. I considered it. I know." He reached up, tucked hair behind her ear in a gesture that had become habitual, tender. "But you didn't, just like I didn't call those guards. Why didn't you?" "Because something in your eyes told me you weren't just surviving, you were searching." He paused. "And I think part of me wanted to be found. I wanted someone to care enough about truth to live in my walls hunting for it." Lyra leaned into his touch. "I found more than truth." "So did I." They sat in comfortable silence, lamplight casting soft shadows on walls that had once hidden so much pain. Now they held only memory and the promise of something better. "Comfortable up there?" Cassian asked, echoing that first impossible question. Lyra looked at him, really looked at this man who'd chosen to burn his own legacy rather than live with lies, who'd stood beside her, not in front of her, when she reclaimed her voice, who'd transformed her prison into a refuge. "Yes," she whispered, "because I'm not hiding anymore." She kissed him then, soft and sure, tasting like spring and new beginnings. When they broke apart, Cassian rested his forehead against hers. "Stay tonight," he said quietly. "Not in the attic, in the house, with me. People will talk. Let them." He smiled. "I'm courting the lady of House Arden, properly, with intention. Let the whole city know." "Courting?" Lyra raised an eyebrow. "Rather presumptuous." "Is it?" His hand found hers, thumb brushing across her knuckles. "Because I intend to marry you, Lyra Arden, eventually, when you're ready. When your house is rebuilt and your life is your own again." He paused. "If you'll have a lord with a smaller estate and a tarnished name." "A lord with integrity," Lyra corrected. "With honor. With a heart that chose justice over everything else." She squeezed his hand. "Yes, eventually. When we're ready. No more hiding." "No more hiding," she confirmed. "For either of us." They descended from the attic hand in hand, leaving the lamp burning behind them. Not abandoning the space, but choosing to live beyond it. That night, Lyra fell asleep in a guest room 2 doors down from Cassian's chambers, propriety maintained, but proximity chosen. She dreamed not of fire and sealed doors, but of rebuilding, of stone laid upon stone, of foundations that would hold, of a future built on truth instead of ash. He didn't find a trespasser in his attic that autumn night 3 years ago. He found the truth buried in his own house, truth that had roots in corruption, but branches that reached towards something better. And she didn't hide in those rafters just to survive. She hid long enough to choose who deserved to stand beside her when she stepped back into the light, long enough to find someone who would burn his own world down before letting hers stay buried. On home wasn't the attic anymore. It was the place where neither of them had to disappear to be safe. It was the space between heartbeats, where 2 people who'd started as shadows became solid, real, whole. It was choosing each other, again and again, in a city that was finally learning to choose truth over silence. And in the house on the cliffs overlooking the sea, where secrets had once layered deeper than foundations, now there was only light. If this story moved you, let me know which moment stayed with you longest. And if you want more slow burn romances where love isn't stolen, it's earned through truth, courage, and the kind of trust that transforms everything, don't forget to subscribe.